Yes. Hey, everyone. Sorry for the wait. Thank you, everybody, for the comments in there. So, Paul, Isabella, Angels, our extreme apologies about that. We had some technical difficulties, but thank you and welcome to the first webinar from OTB Digital. My name is Jared Thomas, the Chief Revenue Officer, and I'm joined by CEO of UpContent, Scott Rogerson. And today we're going to talk about how to fix your social selling programs. So, this is going to be a really interactive webinar today. So any comments you have, please feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll be sure to address them. But this webinar is specifically designed for marketers and brands that are already investing in social selling programs. And we're going to go through some best practices on how you guys can scale your program and see better results. All right. Yep. So with today's agenda, guys, we're just going to remember some of the core benefits of social selling. We're going to discuss the major challenges brands face with social selling, how to create and curate engaging content, and also, lastly, how to measure and get the most out of your social selling programs. So before we begin, guys, and we go into the story about how I've successfully done it and how Scott's have done it as well, but I want to go through this quote that I seen on social media today that was really, really cool. But traditional sales tactics no longer work because desensitized buyers never or take days to respond to emails and refuse to answer from calls from numbers they don't recognize. That's pretty much what it is. And these modern sellers, or social sellers as we call them, create 45 more opportunities and 51% more likely to achieve quota than those who do not embrace social selling. And before we begin, can anybody here? Can you just put in the chat a thumbs up if you can hear us?
Sounds like we're back now and watching the chat, at least for one.
Well, I'm glad we're there. So as we get into this, guys, I want to share my personal story. So I think it's a good segue. So once again, my name is Jared Thomas. About 3 years ago, I've been in the industry for 8 years, and I was a really difficult spot in my career. I was at a small SEO agency, full service agency, and I was tasked with reaching out to the Uber, the Lyfts, and Nikes of the world. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to do that? Right? Nobody knows us in the space. Nobody recognizes us. We don't have relationships in the industry. So how am I going to get those enterprise level relationships? So I had a conversation with the CEO at the time, and I asked him, like, how are we generating sales, or what has been generating revenue to that point? And he told me it was his Twitter following. He had 50,000 Twitter followers, and he was on the circuit. So he was doing keynote speaking. He was booked for a lot of speaking engagements. He had his own curated content that he would create regarding SEO. And then the light bulb went up for me. Bing! I said, no more of the days where I'm sending 1,000 emails, because I've had good quarters, I've had bad quarters, I had everything in between. But wouldn't it be great if I can change the sales leverage and actually create an inbound pipeline for myself by being myself and sharing my expertise? So my first week there, we just started creating content. No editing, no training, guys. I would go downstairs every single morning, get a coffee, and just pull out my phone. We would talk about SEO. We would talk about content strategy, our services. We would talk about parenting, you name it. And then within 3 months, I was able to close the largest deal in my career, which was a $450,000 deal, enterprise level deal that kept us through the pandemic. From there, I just kept on going with the personal branding. So we started our podcast, Rankable. We had a bunch of C-level talent come in, share their story, and we were able to drive traffic through that, but also through personal branding. So I was able to amass over 2 million impressions that first year, and we were able to close $2.2 million in sales without a cold call or email in my first 2 years working there. And then from there, I also did a lot of other things. Like I worked at Hootsuite. I was a strategic account manager working with accounts like Hard Rock International, St. Jude's, many others, and helping them with this very issue of how to scale their programs. I'm also a LinkedIn Black voice to follow and amplify. And I'm also generating right now anywhere close to 3 million impressions per year on the LinkedIn platform. And I'm going to give you all my tips and tricks. And I'm glad to be joined by Scott, as he's an expert in this field as well, and happy to answer any questions you guys have. Okay, so remembering the benefits of social selling, guys. So we can go through this slide, or Scott, would you like to go through this one?
Yeah, I think this is interesting, right? And there's a lot of webinars, a lot of conversations out there on why we should do social selling, why it's important as a strategy. And I think many of the, at least names on this call, we know, right? We all get it. We know why it's important. We want to do that in a way that helps our team, helps our salespeople be more credible, be more authentic, make those connections like what you're talking about, Jarrett. And the numbers prove it out as well. And I bet all of us, before signing on that line and saying, yeah, we're going to implement this strategy, we're looking at a lot of numbers like this. And the purpose of this call, right, is what happens after that, after the strategy gets implemented? How do we get everybody going? But I think it's exciting to continue to see the research proving out that when you do social selling right, not only are you able to get more opportunities, but you're also more likely to close those opportunities by being social selling. It's not just about top of funnel, although that's an important piece, right, to build those relationships by social selling. But just talking to somebody else the other day, it's also about, hey, you should go talk to Jarrett. And I'm like, who the heck is he? I'm going to go on to social right away, right? I'm going to check out your LinkedIn profile, see if this is somebody that I do want to talk about. So it also helps mid-funnel, and certainly reaffirming the belief that this is the right person to work with, this is the right firm to work with. And I think these three metrics touch on each of those areas.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. And even to touch further on that point, the customer journey has changed, everybody. So I think we've all seen that through the pandemic. People are now just not getting webinar, blog content, or content directly from the company. They want to hear from the actual employees, right? They want to hear something that's authentic, something they could relate to. And people are in different channels nowadays, right? They're in Discords, they're in Slacks, they're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook groups, all these Twitter spaces, you name it. So you essentially, as a salesperson, has to be in these different areas where your customers are so you can build those relationships, right? And those who do, as you see in these stats, are the ones that are going to be successful. And especially where the market is today, the quicker you implement a program and work on your personal branding, the easier opportunities are going to be to generate. Right now, it's very hard to make a cold call. And this is going to be the time where it's really going to benefit sellers and marketers alike. Right? So what are some major challenges that brands face with social selling? I know from my experience, Scott, and I would love to hear from yours as well. But these 5 bullet points is what I've always heard from different clients that I've worked with, right? It was either a lack of strategy, inadequate resources, a lack of employee engagement, inadequate technology, and failure to measure, right? So sometimes it's all 5. Sometimes I've seen some with 2 or 3. Some only have 1. But the one that's consistent to me across the board is the lack of employee engagement. And why is that, guys? And as a seller, I'm going to tell you straightforward. If I've been doing sales for 10, 15 years, I already have a set process that I'm trained, that I'm comfortable with, I know works, I know that's proven, that's going to generate revenue for not only myself, but for the company. So it's hard to retrain and reprogram your brain to do something differently. And then you have marketing asking, hey, can you send this to your network? Can you send this to your prospects? And it's just another step in my sales process. But if you can really give them and sell them the vision of what it can do and what are the true benefits on both sides, from marketing and from sales, because marketing's job is, once again, to make our job easier as sales folks. So if you can just help them see the vision and what I call it the LinkedIn bug, all you really want to do is get your team accustomed to using it. It's like working out, right? So the first couple of times, they're not going to see any benefits. You know, I got a couple of views. Oh, look, a new prospect hit me up. It's going to be really cute until they get the one that's 20, 30, 40,000 views and they actually see something that drives revenue. So that's something I would
hit on something interesting, right? When you said the goal is to grow business for myself and for my firm, right? And for my company. And I think this list of 5 actually turns into a list of 10 because you have to evaluate it in 2 different areas. Does my firm have a strategy for social selling? Do I have a strategy for being successful in social selling? And I think you'll see a challenge. Maybe the firm has a great idea, a great vision. Here's what we want to see our top performers do. But when it gets down to brass tacks and you're the one who's actually responsible for implementing that, maybe you personally don't have a strategy. So today we're going to try to touch on both of those areas. And I think the same holds true for resources, right? Are there enough resources? Is there enough training? Is there enough support from the company to the salesperson? Does the salesperson feel like they have the resources that they need? And maybe we shouldn't expect that 100% of those are always being handed to us by the organization. Maybe we have to go and find some of those resources and find some of those best practices ourselves as well to be successful. And that engagement piece certainly ties in to that also. And this is, I think, an interesting area where we start to see the idea of employee advocacy and the idea of social selling sometimes get conflated in the wrong ways, right? It's not the same program. It's not the same strategy. Maybe there are some similar tools, but we're not trying to achieve the same goal, right, between those two. And that's where the marketing and sales conversation needs to happen. Technology for both, right, is important. And then similarly on the metrics, what are we measuring at the company level? What am I measuring for myself? And how am I comparing myself to my peers? And I think this is where we all start to struggle, right? When it gets down and we're in the weeds and we're trying to implement things, what should I expect and when should I expect it, right? And I think when we look at engagement, yeah, I tried to share a few things, Jared. I put some stuff on LinkedIn now and then. It doesn't do anything for me. It's not working, and we know it's all about consistency, and it's about giving 80% of the time and asking 20% of the time. And that requires you as a salesperson to make sure you're holding yourself to that. It also requires the firm or the company to make that ratio available to you. It can't just be all promotional content all the time or all about how great you are and how great the company is all the time. So I think, Jared, and what you've seen, is there a particular bullet point here that kind of stands out like a sore thumb the most when you're kind of looking either from an individual and you're talking with other kind of sales leaders, hey, for them personally, or when they're trying to help their team at a company level, that tends to stand out the most?
Yeah, I think the two that stand out are inadequate resources and then lack of employee engagement. Right. And the lack of employee engagement, really the question you should ask or a brand should ask themselves as marketers or as a company is, am I creating a safe space for my employees to be creative and showcase their abilities? Right. So especially in some firms, like if you're in the financial space, if you're in some of those very stringent, compliant, highly regulated spaces, it's hard to do that. But if you're in SaaS or if you're in tech, it's really a free range to do what you want. And most companies or most people don't want to post because why? How will my coworkers think of me? How will my boss think of me? Right? Does my marketing team approve this message? Right? Can I put up the Christmas photo? Can I do that? Does that all work into the compliance guidelines of what we're doing from a content approval standpoint? And I think another thing is too, I think we also put a lot of emphasis on being able to measure, and which is totally fine, but sometimes it's okay not to be able to measure it, right? So I'll give you my own experience. When I was at the agency, the hardest thing ever to do was to sit there and say, hey, well, I need some additional resources, but I don't really have a tie to it. We don't have a contact us button of where did you hear about us, where I can actually prove that people are coming from LinkedIn, but I know it. I can feel it. I'm getting the DMs. I'm getting the impressions, right? I'm getting the momentum, right? My pipeline is growing. So it's hard to really justify it, but really just make sure that your brand is out there in a creative way. Look at the way that people are creating content right now on LinkedIn. People have put up a webinar, they put up a blog post, but really what you should be thinking is, how am I creating an emotional tie with my customer? What do they like about me? How am I providing value into their life? Am I providing that value? And that's subjective too, right? Sometimes I'll be honest with you, I put something up that was just funny, and I connect with somebody like yourself, Scott, and that doesn't have to be something that was, a thought leader or a showcase of my expertise. It could just be showcasing myself. And now we have a relationship, and now I'm in your DM, and maybe after a while, once we build that trust, I can make an ask.
I think that's well said, and it ties into Jordan's question. And please keep the questions coming because that makes it so much more interesting for us. So the question was, if others haven't seen it, how would someone approach a conversation to get approval for social selling? And, or should we just start without permission from the company? Super interesting question, particularly now, right, where all investments are being evaluated. I think, I hate to give and I want to hear your view on this too, Jared, but from my perspective, there's a terrible consultant answer, and this is my background of being consulting. I'm going to give the it depends answer on this of how you should approach that conversation. It really, you're going to need to know what that relationship looks like with those whom you need approval from, and kind of what they're dealing with right now. If they're sprinting around, sweating bullets, worried about, where that next investment is going to come from, may not be the right time to present a long-term social selling strategy. And maybe you do start to chip away at that yourself as a salesperson, kind of prove it out for yourself and then roll it back up to the organization. If you are presenting it at the company level, the big thing you're going to want to ensure so that you aren't at this point of struggling is that you've objectively covered all 5 of these across the employee level and the company level, so that we all know going in what this means, right? That is, this is an investment, and we don't turn around and say, hey, we've got this great new tool in all of our sales team's hands, and then start shoving as much marketing or promotional content we can into it and wondering why after the first week or two, our team members aren't sharing quite as frequently as we had hoped they would, and start to say, well, this isn't going to work for us. Have that strategy, understand the content mix that we're going to be talking about shortly. Make sure you have the training resource and you don't just send out a password reset notice to all of your sales team and say, that's a new thing. You can use it if you want, it should help you. we're investing in you. Make sure you've got that program of training. And that's where we see a ton of success for companies, is when they wrap around those training resources. And then know what you're looking at. And I think that fifth bullet is really important, but know when you should start caring about the metrics as well. It's not going to be a week in or 2 weeks in for that. How many new leads did we get? How many new conversations did we start? Certainly you can start seeing engagement and adoption and activity levels. And then probably by month 12, engagement, adoption, activity levels are still important metrics, but they're not your key metrics anymore. At that point, you should have elevated and matured your program to the point where you are looking at conversions and new leads into the pipeline, et cetera. Jared, what are your thoughts on that? It's awesome. Awesome question.
That was so true. As far as how to get approval for this, I would look at, if I'm a marketer right now, I'm looking at our outbound sales numbers and justifying the cost of a new program. Because right now, across the board, from what I'm hearing from sellers, it doesn't matter what vertical they're in or what they're selling. Outbound sales is difficult as heck right now. Mm-hmm. We're trying to scramble for revenue. We're trying to figure out other ways to do it. And like you said, you hit the nail on the head. This is a long-term play. Like for me personally, when I started, I didn't get my first deal from LinkedIn until 3 months. And that was somebody that I already knew from prior business, right? But me being out there, I was top of mind. So when she reached out to start the sales conversation, if I wasn't out there, I probably wouldn't have been in the sales conversation to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. But then when I started to see the inbound turn in, when it was VPs and CEOs saying, hey, Jared, I love your content. I've been following you for 8-9 months. I have this specific problem. Can we jump on a call tomorrow, right? And so what happened from that point is, we actually seen the sales cycle get cut in half, right? So instead of me reaching out to somebody and doing sales for 4 to 5 months with multiple stakeholders and approval processes, I'm at the top level and they want to already start and do business. So guess what? There's no discovery now. It's very little, right? They're giving you the issues, they're giving you the problems, and all you have to do is solve it and really be creative. So I would say go for it. You don't really need permission. And then Isabella asked a great question. She says, how do I encourage employees to share more? Right. So there's a lot of different ways. For me, I would say I've seen it best with it when you incentivize them. Like the SPIF program is good, but it also depends on what are their goals. If I was you, I would ask the salespeople or the people in your program, what makes you happy? What makes work fun for you? What is the part of the sales process that you least enjoy? Right? What if we were to do this? What if I was to tell you, instead of you having 6 meetings, we could have 2? Right. So, and I think from a sales perspective, it's one thing hearing it from somebody within the organization, and it's a completely different thing from hearing it from somebody who's your peer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would add to that, I think the spiffs are great as kindling for the fire, right? You can't create a long-term campfire with just a bunch of twigs and leaves, but you also need those in order to start the fire. And so I think a spiffing program, doing the gift cards, leaderboard, those types of activities are great to get people going, right? And say, oh, this is cool, I'm excited. But we've seen in too many cases where you kind of over index on the desire to give these kind of rewards, or, hey, if you do this, we'll give you a mug or other things. And it starts to lose its luster, right? I can only give my 9-year-old, I can only bribe her so many times before she stops caring about what I'm trying to do, because she's had enough candy bars at that point. And I feel like the spiff thing can lean toward that as well. So to your point, Jared, it's got to start turning into new conversations, new sales, new revenue in their pockets. And once you start to do that, now you've lit the main log in the fire, right? And now more people are willing to join. It's going to last a lot longer. And that spiffing may end up really almost fading away, right? And you may focus it more just on the people who you're newly onboarding into the program, because those who are already successful, they don't need that stuff anymore because they're closing deals with the program. Yeah. And so I think that's a great way to start. But in a lot of cases, there are 2 things to look at if we aren't getting the engagement or the adoption that we're hoping for. One is going to be the content itself, right? And I know we're going to touch on that also. If you make it so that the salesperson wants to use it, right? They're going to it because this is the stuff they would have wanted to share with their audience anyway. And you've made it easier for them to get it out to the audience.
That's it.
Then there's no spiffs needed, because the fact that they have the program is seen now as a benefit to them and a reason why they're going to stay and help to grow your business versus go jump ship and go to somebody else's business to help them grow that organization.
So true.
So I know we're going to dig into that further, but that is a fantastic question, and certainly
So
one of those that we hear quite a bit and try to work with organizations to overcome. Again, not saying don't use them, definitely use them, but see them as that kindling, not as the main logs to make the program successful over the long haul.
Yep. And then you hit on a perfect, like they have to know that it's a benefit to them, right? Like as a salesperson, when have you ever had to convince them to use Zoom info?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Never, right? Because they know it's going to help their day to day and it makes their day easier, right? So if you just shift the mindset with that, I said it earlier, but it's the LinkedIn bug, right? For me, what I call that is when somebody actually realizes the organic reach and potential of the platform. So when I got caught with it, it was me telling my story of saying, hey, I was 20 years old trying to get into tech sales. I had my first kid. I was working at Starbucks and BBQs and I had to figure out a way. And it was that story of me telling them how I got into tech and became a top performer that took the sales barrier down and made me a human. It made me a person. It made people want to relate to me, go get coffee, go grab a beer maybe, right? And then when I saw it got 15 to 20,000 views, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and all the other platforms. I'm like, whoa, this is it. But guess what? My audience are potential buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And once you realize that and you see that, you get your sellers to realize that. If you get one person, if you get 5 or 10, 15 people who realize that, think about the ROI long-term for your business, not only for themselves too, but they'll want to stay with you because you gave them the resources and you changed their career.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you hit on something that transitions nicely into Scott's question here, which is, if there are organizational constraints, right, that make it difficult for an ROI to be measured, right? There's a lot going on.
Yep.
There's a lot of different initiatives we're doing to support our sales team. Business is growing. I have a hard time saying, well, yeah, it was exactly due to social selling that helped it grow. It feels maybe like it's a component of that, but I don't know, when I'm going for that renewal or I'm going for my 2024 budget, how do I prove that, right? Prove that the social selling piece comes up, and how do I show value to not just the salesperson, right? Or in financial services, the advisor who's seeing it themselves because they're feeling the momentum, they're feeling everything that you talked about, but to the chief revenue officer who knows it exists, but maybe hasn't really had a lot of time to pay attention to what's going on. How do you boil that up to that level of metrics? What have you seen there?
Yeah, for me, I think what first and foremost, I think one, we should not put such a focus on everything that we can attribute. That's just first and foremost, right? Because the data is never going to be purely accurate, right? If I share an article tomorrow with a link or without a link, there's no way for me to track who came into the website, what customers that are actively customers that their sentiment improved by something I've posted, and all those different things. So what I would look at is like a broad metric. And then for things I can't attribute, I'm going to put it back into our social selling bucket. So I would look at increase the brand awareness, right? So if you're using like a social listening tool, a Talkwalker, a Hootsuite, something of that nature, right? You can see what the sentiment and how it's improved as you started your program. I would look at leads generated. So I would also have a new drop down field, right? Like, where did you hear about us? And make sure LinkedIn is one of them, right? And then you could have something to tie back to when you go to your CRO. I would look at it, work with the SEO team, increase website traffic, look at referral traffic, look at LinkedIn traffic, your community, right? Like, so look at your overall social performance, right? If your LinkedIn is increased by 500 followers, that's something that you could maybe attribute to the success of your social sellers, right? So when I was in a program, for how we judged it was leads generated. Once again, we generated, I think we took our LinkedIn profile from 400 followers to 2,800 by the time I left. And that's an extreme value, right? Yep. So just think about those things, right? It's not always going to be a one-to-one attribution thing, but you got to let them know this is going to be a long-term play that affects many facets of our business.
Yep. And I think the other piece that we often neglect, right? Because we're in the digital world and everything can come down to so many great little metrics and KPIs. Yeah. Is just talking to those who are using the program. Hey, is this working for you? Hey, can you attribute any benefit to doing this? And you may get some really compelling stories. And as we all know, any of us who have a marketing slant, stories sometimes eclipse metrics easily, right? If I can tell a story, hey, one of our sellers was actively engaged in the program. She had a DM come through and X, Y, and Z happened. And now it's this customer, right? It's not just your LinkedIn post isn't going to just convert customers, but as you had talked about, Jared, it does help remove the entire part of the sales cycle. That's about, is this person credible? Can I believe anything that he has to say to me. I need to figure that out first before I'm going to pay attention to anything that you told me in that demo or in the offerings that you've provided to me. And so if you're consistently sharing things that are of interest to me, I'm learning about you more personally, then when we connect, you've already done all that, right? And we can just focus on solving my problem. And that's going to shorten the sales cycle as well. So I think that's another area to look at ROI is, are the sales cycles shorter? Are we getting more, as you said, opportunities to present our solution? Are we getting opportunities to the point where we can actually get to presentation versus disqualifying right away? Those can be additional nice metrics to help tell the story that the data points maybe are missing because we're just looking at small aperture. How is it working over here? How is it working over there? It's going to be your sales team that can help draw the line between those data points.
Absolutely. Nailed it. And Scott actually asked a follow-up great question. Is there any value in surveying your sales network on how they feel about using the program? And absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the investment, right? It's for both of you, right? It's how do we make both of our jobs easier, right? If I'm the marketer and I'm creating content and putting resources to drive sales, but then it's falling flat, right? It's not getting the eyeballs, right? You have to look at your sales team as a way to amplify your message, but they also have to see the benefit for themselves. So I would survey them and say, how long is it taking you to get sales right now? How long does it take you to get a new prospect in your pipeline? What are you using right now? How many cold calls does it take? How many emails has it take? What is your open rate? I would look at all those different things, right? And then try to work with them on how they can make it easier. So if you do have content, let's say you have a killer ebook, you just put 3 months into it. It's how to do SEO correctly, your SEO firm, right? I would have the sales team come up with content every single day for it, right? For one page is 5 bullet points and come up with a story of how you can help customers. That's building trust every day by repurposing and remixing the existing content that you have.
Yeah, so I think that, and using almost treating your sales team as customers, right? So even do just that simple NPS survey. Would you recommend to the next person that they use this program, right? 1 through 10, if they're, whatever it is, 8, 9, 10, they're a promoter, that's great. Or 9, 10, if they're 7, 8, they're neutral. If it's anything below a 7, they're a detractor. What's the NPS score of your social selling program right now amongst your team?
Love that.
And when you kind of roll that up, the statement is not necessarily, right? You can add this, but how much new business has come from the program, but how low is your churn going to be amongst the sales team that you've invested in, right? So how likely are they to jump ship and go and sell somebody else's product? How can you retain talent by giving them the resources that they need if they say they need them? Because salespeople are the best out of anybody, that if it's not working, they're not going to use it. They don't have time. They'll drop it, in a second. So if we can get the sales group to say, yes, this is valuable. Yes, it's helping me grow my business. That's a very strong indicator that something is working well in accomplishing that.
Yep, absolutely. And Isabel, I see your question too, as far as what types of content. So we're going to go through that in the next couple of slides. So I'm going to make sure I address that and pull the question back up. And then Angel just asked just now, can you define social selling holistically? Because I thought it also included watching people who change jobs, having alerts at what their companies are searching, etc. Social selling is just the practice of using social media and your channels to generate sales, right? That's essentially what it is, right? So instead of you using traditional methods like email, cold calling, you're using your own content, your feed, in order to connect with customers and drive sales to yourself. So that's essentially what it is, right? Can it include those things? Absolutely. But if I was you, and how I focus on my personal brand is just generating more conversations. How can I have more conversations with people like Scott?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What you're talking about there, right, is social prospecting, which is a key component, right, of social selling. You're identifying new prospects that you could be having a relationship with. But then the next piece, which is kind of what we've been spending a lot of the time on, is the actual building credibility aspect of selling, so that when they do have an issue, they think of you instead of you having to go out and reach out to them and say, hey, you changed job. Maybe you could buy my stuff now. You've built up that background. You've built that credibility. They know that if I'm worried about what's going wrong in social selling, I know who to talk to, right? And maybe they don't have that problem today. Maybe they'll never have that problem, but a colleague of theirs might, or a friend of theirs might, and now they can make that connection. So it's definitely more encompassing. The difference from like an advocacy program, which is another kind of larger program that has a lot of similarities, is the advocacy side is being utilized to reflect positive vibes back on the company, right, and the team. It doesn't necessarily have a direct revenue correlation to what our goal is, where social selling is about sales. in the end. And so we do need to make sure that that is still a metric that we're looking at.
Yeah, nailed it. Nailed it. Let's get the, yep. So these are just some brands that successfully do social selling or implement good social selling strategies. We won't go into all of them. I know we spent a lot of time on the questions just now, but one that works really well that I love personally is Gong. So if you guys aren't familiar with Gong, Gong is a SaaS platform that helps sellers sell more effectively, right? You can record your calls, it tells you your filler words, and it really just, it's a sales intelligence platform. So when I was put onto Gong, I would see their SDRs, I would see their CMO, all the way down from the executive team to the lowest person on the team or sales or marketing team. They all had a personal brand, right? And over the 3 years that I've been on LinkedIn, I've seen their valuation go from $1 to $7 billion, right? And after having a conversation with the CMO, Udi Ledegor, and if you guys want to, it's on YouTube on More Than a Title. I asked them, how was you selling? How are you scaling your programs? Is there a set formula you guys have? Because everybody has one. He just allows them to be creative. Have fun. Don't be stupid. If you want to share your skills, do it. Some people are SEOs. They don't even want their profile up, right? And that's fine. But the people who do want to be out there and want to, you give them the resources and you give them the opportunity to be themselves. And now there's people on his team like Devin Reed and so many others that are been there for 7 years that have built up email lists of 200,000 customers, which is insane. And how does that affect the ROI of the business, right? So that's an amazing thing I would look at too. And then Hootsuite, I have to say, I was a part of Hootsuite's team and I helped scale our program, right? I was actually training our team on LinkedIn best practices, right? And we've seen an uptick in outbound. But one thing that we wouldn't do, we would have Amplify and we would use services like UpContent and other to fuel our social selling program, but everybody would do it the same way. And that's something I wouldn't want everybody to kind of understand too, right? If you have a social selling program and you have the content there, but we're all just pressing the share button without additional context, it can have a negative impact on you, right? You're seeing 100 people. Think about the relaunch and the rebrand. You remember that, the rebrand, Scott?
Sure.
I would get emails because everybody was sharing the same article and people would DM me like, Jared, if I see one more thing about this rebrand, I'm going to lose it. But that's great feedback to have, right? But if it was context, like, hey, I've been at Hootsuite for 4 years and this is the most exciting time I've been here. We worked on this, and a third, and I want your input. That's a different conversation from you just pressing a button.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think and it's helpful as you go look at some of the different team members that are at these different companies on LinkedIn, and you will sometimes see the same content, but in most cases, I think you will see a little bit of flavor from the person sharing it as well, kind of their perspective on that. And I think that's what makes it compelling, because even if I do see the same graphic, I'm almost more intrigued to see, well, what does Katie think about that versus what Sean said about that, and, oh yeah, that's that guy. I know him. Like, yeah, that's his voice coming through for sure, but for Sean, the hope is that he only had to spend 30 seconds kind of adding his own color to that versus what we would normally have had to do in the past, right? If the article happens, I have to think that I need to do it, copy a bunch of things, rewrite it, right, get it out there. So I think these are great things to look at, because what you'll see is it's obvious their structure, it's obvious their strategy, but in most cases they're taking it up until the last foot, right, and then allowing that individual to add their own color onto it before they share it. And that does a world of difference, to your point, than here's 10 things that I want everybody to share today, or I'm automatically going to share these 10 things across your social profile and it's going to post at noon for everybody, right? That's not a social selling program. That's a content distribution program. And so it's important to consider those differences and really what you.
Yeah, great points. Great points. Right. So the fun part, right? So how do you create and curate engaging content online, right? So there's so many different formats of content and where you should be. So I'm only going to focus on the main channel that we focus on, right? And it's LinkedIn. So as you guys see by this graph, 63% of B2B content marketing happens on LinkedIn, right? Followed by Twitter at 55%, and then followed by YouTube at 48%, right? But why is that, right? I talked about the organic reach a little bit earlier. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, the stat that probably most don't know. So there's 722 million active users on LinkedIn right now. But according to LinkedIn, only 2 to 5% are active every single day. And that's a huge stat, right? And why is it huge, everybody? That's why the organic reach is what it is, right? You can have 70 followers on LinkedIn and then make a post that goes viral and get 1 million or 2 million, 3 million views. I see it happen every single day, right? So because LinkedIn is a content deficient platform, meaning people don't want to post because of the, their professional image, right? What will my coworkers think? Will anybody care? Do I have something that's impactful? Is anything I'm saying valuable, right? And they put so much emphasis on these things where they're not creating content. And now we're seeing the ones that do create take the immense benefits that come with it, right? So, and also I'm gonna give you guys another pro tip, right? When it comes to LinkedIn, because I know we talked about sharing external content as well. So LinkedIn's main goal is to keep people on platform, because how they make their revenues through ad sales, right? Same as YouTube, same as Google, right? So their main goal is to keep people on the platform. And if you share external links, the pro tip is to put it in your comments, so it bypasses the algorithm, right? The algorithm doesn't want to have something in your post that's going to take people off the platform. So that's just a pro tip. If anybody wants to know more, we got more tips there. But let's go through some real content, what's really working on the system right now on the platform. So this is a post from a good friend of mine, Chris Walker. If you guys aren't familiar with him, he's the CEO of Refine Labs, right? But he's thought leadership. He doesn't put any post unrelated to his business, and that's totally fine. That's his personality. But look at the quality of the content, right? Very hard, nice tagline. Marketing source revenue always beats influence, but he has the why. Bullet pointed out, it's numbered. He has great quality video footage to accompany that. And it just looks like something he put time and effort to, right? It's not something that it's not something that he just put it 2 seconds up. He put the time, he put the thought, and he's been able to generate and build a multi-million-dollar business through content like this. I've seen him on Forbes, Adweek, so many different things, when 4 years ago, he didn't have those opportunities. So it's an immense opportunity. This is one piece of content, but look at how digestible it is as well. Spaced out. Nobody wants to see a long paragraph, right? When you're on LinkedIn, you're scrolling quickly. You need something to catch your eye and something I can just go to. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I love this. And then make a reaction. So that's one good way to create content. Thought leadership is always good, and that's going to be the go-to on LinkedIn for most parts. But there's other ways you can go about it, right? This is something I put about recruiting, right? So this is when I was at Hootsuite. And I'm going to go over it really quickly, because I think the main thing about posting content is what emotion does it evoke from your readers, right? So if you don't know me, it was like 6 months ago. I wasn't myself. I lost my energy. My usual spark wasn't there. Mentally drained. I was in between jobs. And then Hootsuite was the only place that saw my vision for what I could bring to the table as far as my personal brand. During the interview, I asked, can I still work on my brand, continue my podcast? They said, we want you for you. As soon as I heard that, I knew that's the place I wanted to be. But I'm moving to Atlanta. I felt like myself. Doors were opening up. I was on pace for President's Club, and things were happening, right? This one got 351 likes and 22,000 views. Now, it didn't have any link to it, right? But I was getting DMs from my current customers who saw this. It was like, I love the fact that I'm working with you. I've got DMs from other people's customers like, man, I'm so glad I'm at Hootsuite. I got DMs from people saying, man, I'm applying right now, man. If they're going to let you be you, this is the place I want to be. So think about that as you think about your content, what they're sharing, right? If I didn't have the autonomy to do so, or the green light to do so, we wouldn't have those impressions. We wouldn't have those likes. We wouldn't have more people doing it, right? And it affects so many different areas of the business, all from just being yourself, telling your realistic story.
Yep. And I think the biggest piece in showing these two different options here is that there is no silver bullet, right, to this. It's not just, hey, everybody from now on, just go start talking, emotion every time you post something.
No.
Don't just go, hey, you're going to have to spend, right? As you said, it looked like Chris spent a lot of great time and worthy time on creating that video and putting that post together. But I'm sure a lot of us are like, I could not do that, right? And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful as well. And it certainly doesn't mean that you need to do that every single time you post something. And so I think the biggest piece, and we had a great conversation with Scott Brinker, who's one of my favorite people over at HubSpot, asking him about his, personal, how does he approach his profile? How does he approach his brand? And pretty much what came out of that was, don't overthink it, right? Just kind of be yourself, right? If you have something to say, just say it. This doesn't need to be a novella every time you write something. You don't need to worry about, well, at least, for me, I always put the commas in the wrong spot. Like, don't worry about it, right? That's who you are. That's your brand. I don't know grammar. So you just be that way, because that's who the person's going to be interacting with outside of LinkedIn as well. And that's what you're trying to showcase. The worst thing is when you spend all this time and energy trying to present yourself as someone that you're not, right? With the goal of social selling, at some point, that's going to be, the mask is going to come off, right? And then you're going to have wasted all this time trying to qualify someone who wants to work with the LinkedIn version of you, but not the actual version of you. So be
Yep,
yourself, because at some point they're going to have to deal with the you, and there's no point in trying to convince them otherwise just to have it all fall apart at the end. So I think these
yep,
are both really great examples of how to accomplish it, and mix and see what works well for you and how
yep,
you're presenting the
for
content.
sure. And I was going to say another good thing that works too is things that we all have experienced, right? Relatable content. I'll give you another idea. Like, it was one day I actually closed business through this, right? So a young lady, she was a CEO. She ghosted me at a call at 8:30 at night. She didn't give me an email, call, or anything. I go on a LinkedIn at 9:03. Heated. Heated. I'm thinking I got a deal. It was the last stage, and she didn't say anything. So I'm like, hey, it's 8:30 at night. I have two kids. If you can't make it, a simple let's reschedule will work every single time, because I'm the seller. I need your business. I need to have this meeting. The post went viral. I hate that. I hate this. Oh man, when people do that to you, and sellers across the board. And what happened was the CEO saw the post, calls me at 10 o'clock at night to apologize, reschedule for a day or two later. And then within a week, we were signing a PO. So it can be something as simple as that. Now she felt bad, like, oh man, I totally forgot about this guy. Now I want to be business. Actually, he called me out. I kind of like that. I appreciate that. You know what I mean? So it can be anything. There is no silver bullet, everybody.
Yep.
This is another great format too. So this is what I call edutainment content, right? Where it's really kind of breaking down a complex idea, but making it in an digestible, fun, funny way, right? So this is a good creator, Alex Sheridan. If you guys want to connect with him, he's all about video content and how it drives sales. But his whole thing is, how do you create compelling content that drives inbound pipeline? And look how he is. He's done rap battles with himself. He's done CEO of LinkedIn versus Twitter, how you're supposed to speak. He's done so many funny content, and he's been able to build a 6-figure business strictly on LinkedIn by creating this type of content. So imagine if you was to, there might be sellers on your team right now who are avid editors, who are great at doing things like that, that are songwriters and musicians, so much talent within your sales team, but they're afraid to unleash that creativity. Think about what it can have for the business. Let them be themselves, right? Let it go and test it for 6 months. See what happens. Have a blend of this and curated content, and you can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. And this was a good one too. This was actually one that was picked up by the LinkedIn news editors, right? So if you guys go on desktop on LinkedIn, if you look on the right rail, so if you need content or ideas for content, they always put the top trending stories. And one of them was the Blockbuster sleepover, right? But it wasn't the fact that I shared it, right? And usually sharing, when you repost things, it doesn't get really a lot of visibility. But this one got 8,000. And I think the real reason why is because that's my childhood stories. What was Blockbuster like for me? I remember my mom taking me, and I would get 2 video games and a movie and a Sour Patch and a soda, and then I would go home for the weekend and be excited, right? And that was a lot of people's memories, right? And that's what resonated with people. When we started having these stories and sharing Blockbuster memories, out of those people sharing Blockbuster memories, there were CEOs, VPs, directors of social media, all people who now I can have a conversation with in a DM and maybe see if we can work together because we had that positive first interaction.
Yep. And I think what's interesting about this, right, and this kind of goes back to Isabella's question, some of the original content examples that you showed were multimedia, right? Videos, imagery, things of that nature, things that take time to produce. And we really see those as assets. That doesn't mean I need to create 2 of these a day, right? You'll kill yourself doing that. Really focus, only do that when you've got something unique to say that you're excited about, if you're going to go in the video route, or if it's a spur of the moment thing, it doesn't need to be super professional. Like in terms of the production value, just throw up your phone, take a quick video of yourself talking about something that is important to you. Because again, what you're trying to do is show who you are and connect with those who want to connect with you, and kind of cut through that noise. And so that's a great way to use the multimedia side. On the third-party content piece, these are the kind of operational expenditures of your content strategy, right? This is a story that came about that you didn't have to do all the journalistic work to create, but that inspired a thought. And I think what happens too many times is we read something, we have that thought, and we move on to the next thing. And really all that's being asked here for us as sellers is that when we read something and have a thought, write it down, put it in a post and share it and see what happens, right? And I think that's all. We don't need to overthink it. Make sure you've got that mix. But if you don't know where to start and you're freaking out right now of the great videos and other things that Jarrett put together, you don't have to be Jarrett. to get started, right?
Absolutely
You
not.
can get to there, and Jarrett's got some awesome stories about how he started to get to where he is. But just find an article that's interesting to you, share it, and see who else is interested in that. Share your thoughts on the article and start having those conversations. That's going to give you the motivation and just start to show you that, hey, there is something here. This is starting to work, and that'll make you feel better when you start investing more time and energy in being strategic about what you're posting and how you're posting it.
Absolutely, you nailed it, right? And I'll be honest with everybody listening. Like my best post, I may have wrote in 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I look at LinkedIn as my personal journey, right? Like for instance, this is my first business meeting and partnership, right? So I'm going to show what it was like. I'm going to show how I feel. I'm going to show what's going through my mind, right? For this one, I just saw Blockbuster and thought about the great memories of my mom, right? Threw it out there. One day I was talking to my sales partner. He was like, man, how'd you get into sales? I put up that post. It got 30,000 views. And it took 5 minutes to write. So that's what really I want you guys to understand is that there is no silver bullet, like Scott said. You can use your own personality, but people want real. They want authenticity. They want what are your real thoughts? What is it like to be a salesperson and a parent? What is it like to prepare for that big call? Right? Like those are the things that people really want to hear. And that's how you build that trust. Because when they know, we can spot fluff from a mile away, guys. And that's the real thing. So, wait, we have another one. Do I just start with a phone, or does the company invest in a camera or social copy hires? I started with my phone. I went downstairs, had a coffee every day, just press the record button. I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to do anything. I was just hoping somebody would listen. Then 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8. And next thing you know, you have people that are actually your friends now that are supporting your journey. So all you have to do is get started. Staying consistent is the hard part.
That's a really good point. And I think the company content can be helpful, but it should not be the majority or anywhere near the majority of the content that you're sharing, right? Because the company has their own profiles that they can share all that content onto. You should pick what you like best out of that content and share that as well. I think where we see a lot of challenges, right, is where the expectation is that everybody shares everything that the organization creates. And if I share everything, that's almost akin to me sharing nothing in terms of what you learn about who I am, right? All you've learned is that I work for this organization and that I'm nice enough to share everything that they create. But if the company creates 10 blogs over 2 months and I only share 2 or 3, maybe there is a little bit more of a discerning palette that I have around what I think is valuable. And that helps you learn a little bit more about me. So really that company kind of promotional content, what we usually see is around 20% of what you share. It's promoting the company, promoting their offering. 50 or so percent should be your industry thought leadership. Kind of some of the examples that you showed, Jarrett, things that you create, could be things that you curate about thought leadership, and company blog content that is thought leadership content. Your organization knows a lot about the industry that they're in. They're spending a lot of time and investment creating great pieces. Why not share that, right? To show that your organization has some authority as well. And then the last 30 or so percent is exactly what is on the screen right now, right? It's this lifestyle. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm all about. Here's what I feel. Here's what I'm thinking right now. We're all human beings. I'm not a robot who just loves curated content all the time. Like, let's talk about other stuff too. Because if you think about any of your great sales relationships, you were talking about other stuff too. And so make sure you're doing that digitally also. That's where the relationships really start to form. They have to trust you. You have to be credible, but they also have to know you and like you in order to do business with you.
That's it. Great analogy I've once heard is two lines I've heard that were great in terms of social selling. Teach them how to fish and they'll learn you sell fishing poles. And also, you're here and your buyer is here. Content is the bridge to get across, right? Yeah. And that's really what it is. Content is the goal. It broke me down and made me a person. I can't tell you, if I would have led with, hey, this is my cool product and this is what I do, I wouldn't have the conversations. People wouldn't want to reach out. People wouldn't want to go get lunch or have those conversations, right? Wait, we got a great question. I know we got one more slide too with the curated content, but this says from Scott, thinking about content creation from, hold on, I got the slide thing. There we go. Thinking about content creation from corporate, how would you address that? Should we be creating less content or broadening the content we offer so that sales staff can pick up the pieces that speak to their brand? Or is it responsibility of authenticity on the individuals? Great question.
Oh my gosh. Awesome.
Ooh, great question.
Jared, do you want to take
it? Yeah, I can take it, man. I think that's That's a great one. So one thing we think about, so thinking about content creation from a corporate standpoint, right? When I look at B2B marketing or content, it's boring and boring, right? We all do the same things. We do the same messaging. It's the same webinars, the ebooks, the infographics, and all those things, right? That's always going to be need to be done. But what I would want to do is how can I get this information into my sales folks so they could put a certain spin on it and they can have that creativity, right? Because once again, like I said earlier, what if somebody in your sales team can actually edit? What if they can actually have the great idea? Like for me, I'm a musician, so I had to learn marketing because there's 80 musicians in my neighborhood, right? So I've got to try to stand out, and they may be able to help you with that. And you thinking about how do I stand out as corporate? You got to be able to do that, guys. So like, think about, how can I empower my sales folks? And one, even talk to your executive team is how can we stand out as an organization? Do a social media content audit or even a competitor audit. Look at what they're doing and then bring that up with some ideas and then ask your sales team to be involved. I guarantee you guys come up with a home run.
And I love this. This reminds me of a recent conversation. So we were talking with a marketing team, right? And they weren't doing what you're talking about, Jared. They were creating content, right? Creating the exact post. And while they would let people edit the post text for third-party content, for their own content, it was in a gold frame and you had to say it just like they wrote it, right? In order for it to go out. And same conversation about, well, no, they have to share it just like this, was, hey, everybody, we had 20 other people share this article. And I was like, well, what did they write the same post text, right? Because there were 20 people outside of the organization that shared the article. Well, what did they say? Aren't you concerned that they didn't say the exact same post text that you wrote? Oh, no, it's great. Like, it's great that we're getting this reach. Or great that we're getting all these shares. It's like, why do you have a double standard where your team has to say something exactly? But if somebody else finds it outside of your organization and shares it, you're comfortable with them saying something more personal as long as it's getting the engagement and the clicks and the action that you're hoping for. Why can't you trust your team enough that they can say something valuable about the post? And I think that's exactly, to your question, Scott. I think the first step is there's likely a number of different perspectives that can be taken from one piece of content that your team's creating. So it may begin by just allowing the team to share their own perspective. Or if you want to kind of ease into that, maybe asking the group that's creating the content to maybe put a few different perspectives out there and see if people are sharing different ones. And that can help to build your case that, hey, maybe we need to keep loosening this up a little bit further. If you're happy with me sharing your company's blog and saying whatever I want, why aren't we happy with our team saying whatever they want? They are way smarter than I am about what's important in that piece of content. And so it's a very interesting question about, how we hold our own team maybe to a different standard than somebody else. And we get upset when we say something different as a team member, but when somebody else says whatever they want, we're ecstatic.
Yeah. And great point, Scott, man. And throughout my career, I've been in the industry for 11 years. As a salesperson, what I've never seen marketing and sales collaborate. I've never seen it happen. Like there's marketing on this side, there's sales on this side. When it's good, it's kumbaya. But when it's not, I'm pointing fingers at you, you're pointing fingers at me. But never have I sat in a conference room and say, sales, you guys talk to the customer. What do we need? I would start with that. Just have the conversation, see what happens, right? And then take your content strategy and then optimize it from there. They know your customers best, just like you know the problems the best.
Yeah, I think the best way to go about it, which is so rare, but when it happens, it's amazingly successful, is when you treat the individuals that are using your social selling program as your first customer.
Yes.
Because and that's who you prioritize. Don't worry about the engagement or the clicks or the sales that they're getting, because that's what they're worried about. And they'll tell you if it's not working, right? So how do I get my team the content that they need, the resources that they need so that they can build their business the best? And then report back to them on how well it's working. Because if they're starting to get sales from it, they're starting to see traction, they're going to keep using it. And so in too many cases, we're using our sales team as a conduit to the end customer and then trying to attribute that benefit back to the content that we've created, rather than saying, the sales team's successful, I'm happy, right? Things are working, the business is growing. And so I think that's an important piece. And there are a few that we've worked with where we've seen that happen. And it's amazing. And that's the only time we see these groups working well together.
Absolutely. And Angel made a good. He said, "I think I fell prey to posting but not engaging."
Ooh,
R.
good one. Good one.
Please engage. That's
Yeah.
that's how you build every. I don't care when I first started. I don't care if I had one like. I am DMing that one like. I'm saying what's up. I'm not pitching you. I had a 10-step sales process, and if, depending on how the conversation go, then I may make an ask. But I am just building relationships. Don't think about selling. Don't think about anything. How can I build as many relationships as possible? And I promise you, if you do that and just give, it's going to be reciprocated back. People are going to make referrals. People are going to reach out to you when they need it. Although I've taken hundreds of calls after hours about LinkedIn. I've seen people now with 60, 70,000 followers. That's what it's about. So just do it for the right reasons. Help other people out, and it's going to be reciprocated. And engage. You can't expect support if you don't support others.
So Jared, I know we're right at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
If there's any other questions, we're happy to engage with them. Otherwise, do you want to flip over to the slide so they can respond back to you or send emails if they have questions individually? I think it's the last
absolutely. So
emails on there.
Yep. So last slide. Here we go. So if you want to know more, my email is jared@otbdigital.com. So we're actually in business now. There's actually our first operating day. You guys can go to the otbdigital.com site. But we do consulting for social media programs. We're helping brands scale their social selling programs. We do live LinkedIn workshops. So for instance, if you want to say, hey, how do I get more of my sellers involved? They can hear from their peer. They can hear from somebody who's done it, that executed, that can show them results and show them what's happened and how it's changed my life. We've done that for plenty of brands. We have digital courses and so much more. So, if you guys want any more information, please feel free to reach out or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always a resource for you guys. And Scott, thank you again for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure working with you, brother.
Yeah, you as well, Jared. So while this is our first day, this is not my first day working with Jared. So I'm excited under the new brand for what you're going to be doing. And thanks everyone for attending. Excited to get questions and continue conversations on LinkedIn or whatever platform is best for you.
Yes, sir. And also, me and Scott also have another social site. We actually have a More Than a Title episode. So if you guys want to go to YouTube, it's More Than a Title. It's episode 8, season 1. And we talk about a lot of different social selling practices. We talk about Scott's upbringing into the industry, myself, how you should incentivize your employees, all these different things. So it's basically part 2 of this conversation. So if you want to check that out, there's more information there. And thank you everybody for attending and taking time out your day. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks all.